Hello, this is Jill Aronofsky. I have been stamping and making handmade cards for a very long time. I'm a Stampin' Up demonstrator, and today I'm going to show a card made with the Mixed Florals stamp set. And I don't usually color, but sometimes it can be relaxing and fun. So I'm going to show you an easy way to get some vibrant colors. And let's begin. I have already cut my pieces. I have a 5.5 by 8.5 early espresso card base, which I'm going to fold in half. And the 4-inch by 5.25 inch is going to go on the inside. I'm just going to set that aside from now. And a 4-inch by 5.25 piece of green two-tone paper that was embossed with one of these embossing folders that just has an overall pattern, kind of like antiquing or aging. I just want to get a little bit more texture on that, and I'll show you how later. A 2.5 by 5 and by 5.25. 5.25. Okay, by 5.25 basic beige, and then basically a 1/2 inch by 2 or 2.25 inch piece of basic beige. One tip that I've recently learned, and I can't remember where I heard it from, is I have gotten the blank, uninked white craft pad, and it comes with a white craft refill, which is always helpful for certain techniques. And I have filled it with black memento ink. I wasn't really happy with the impression that I was getting with my older black memento ink pads, and this was suggested. And so far, I'm really very happy with the coverage that it provides. So I'll keep you updated on that. This one is a large stamp. I'm using the Daisy from here. These are both really great stamps to color with, and I'm going to use my blending pens today. They're my favorite because they're not like regular markers where it can splotch and get really heavy and sometimes so wet that it kind of scruffs up the paper a little bit. So I've made this to go a little bit slanted, and I had to slant it also to fit it on my block. You could also use a stamping tool that will allow you to do it again if you don't get good coverage. But I think this way of using the black memento ink is working super well for me now, and I would suggest you might want to give it a try. I'm going to put my stamp aside so I don't get ink all over myself, and I'm going to show you the many, many colors that I've used here. I just took a whole bunch of the colors that I wanted to use off of my marker stand, and then I just scribbled little bunches to see what the colors would look like. And then I decided, which ones I wanted to use and in what order I wanted to use them. So I'm going to start with the flower centers. And Stampin' Up! Has these skin tones. These are SU 100 and SU 200. I'm going to use the 200 first because it's lighter. And I'm going to use the smaller end of it. It has the brush end. And then this end is harder and finer, and I prefer to use this one on smaller areas because I get more control with it. And I usually do little small round circles. Even though it doesn't really leave lines, it just sort of helps me fill it in better, and I try not to be too meticulous about getting it to go all the way to the edge and making it totally perfect, because art is just not always perfect, and that's just not an excuse for when I make mistakes. So I add a little bit of highlight out where they show. They have these little dotted marks, and that's where you're supposed to put the shading. So that is very helpful. And I have my little cheat sheet here. So for the flower centers, I used SU 200 and 100. And then here I start with dark Calypso Coral. So this is my dark Calypso Coral, small end. And I'm just going to go out from the center. And I'm going to use each one of these colors. This flower is smaller, so I'm going to do a little bit smaller bit. And just work my way out a little bit. So this is not the fascinating part. Then it goes to dark pumpkin pie. You can switch your colors, just play with them and see what you like best. But I saw one with these dark, vibrant orange. And orange isn't really my color. Sorry, Ruthie. But it can be beautiful. And I will show you also that I originally made this card on white base, and it just didn't feel right to me. So I decided to pull out my basic beige, which we've had for a while, and it's a lovely color, but I just don't often think to use it. Now you can see that it's leaving a little bit of a line between these. As it dries, you might get a little bit more of the line, but we can go back and fix that at the end. So it's not really a concern, and you'll just have to be the judge whether you think it's very noticeable. This was like Calypso Coral. And excuse me, and this is light peach pie, which isn't in color. And I'm going to go almost to the end. I'm not really going to go all the way to the end. And I'm going all the way up, so I'm coloring over the colors that I've already done. And see, it looks great already. So I'm going to let that dry when I do the other colors. I've got a dark Daffodil Delight, and I'm just going to do all the little colors in Daffodil. Daffodil's a very strong color, but when you use it on the beige, it kind of gives it that more warmer tone than sort of bright. So I just scribble these in, and it's much more easy to do with a small end of the blender pen. These are alcohol markers. I really love them. I didn't ever feel like I was successful at coloring until I got these markers. So this is not a Stampin' Up color. It's a Copic, because Stampin' Up didn't have the exact color that I wanted, or I didn't have it in my stash. So I am using the brush end, but I'm using it very gently. Just over all the leaves and the stems. I'm going kind of fast. I don't really think, I try not to stress too much about coloring. It's a kindergartner's job, so we all should be able to do it. And I'm not an artist. I just love to play with the colors, and I love making cards, and I've done it a long time. So I've got the lighter green on there, and then with a dark mossy meadow, I'm going to go in and add a little bit under, just for along the middle. And that's it. And so when you look at this, if you decide that you can see the lines a little bit too much, I would start, it's not what you prefer. You can go with a brush end and just go in and lay a little bit more color over that, and it will help smooth it out. I'm doing it with the lightest color, the last color I used, which is the light peach pie, and that helps smooth it out a little bit. And that's it. That's a lot of markers, but I think it's very pretty coloring. So this embossed, I'm going to use one of my little sanding blocks. These are basically used for nail care. And I'm just going to take put it down and scrape it. You can scrape it as much as you want. It does make a bit of a mess. And that brings out the two-tone on the inside of the paper. And I stamped this in black memento. You could also do it with the early espresso that you're using in the flower. And I wanted a saying that was not specific to an occasion. So out of this stamp set here, which is retired now, the Notes of Nature, just a little note to say hello. I send a lot of cards to people for no reason at all, except that I love them and miss them. And so this is the type of card I send the most. Just gonna gently ink it and hopefully get it on here straight. Not bad. And then we assemble the card. I have my base. I'm gonna turn both of these over and put ink on the back. I've gone back to using my green glue more than my Seal Plus, because I usually end up with glue on my fingers, but it does give you a little bit of wiggle room to give your layers, make sure that they're nice and straight before you press them down. So I love how this is distressed and a little bit antique-y looking once you've used the sanding block on it. That on here. Oops. Put this on here. And then a few dimensionals. I love dimensionals. There, on there, just to pop it up a bit and give it a little bit of dimension. Lift those off with my pick tool. And put it on here. Sometimes I leave the white to go inside. I'll write on it first before I put it inside the card. So sometimes my brain works faster than my hand and I goof up my words. So you could add gems, you could add a little bit of twine, but I just wanted to show you the coloring technique today. The Mixed Florals is a beautiful set. It also has dies. This one doesn't correspond with, it's just extra greenery to put behind. And this cuts out the daisy and the tulips and some additional leaves if you want to oomph it up a little bit. So that's today's card. Thanks for watching, and I hope you join again soon.